welcome everybody to session 4, focused around communication and leadership. Another packed agenda for today. We just move the slides on. We'll cover off the agenda for today. So, quick summary from myself before we get started. Then, looking forward to hearing from Naresh and Caroline from Rule 3. Then we're going to pick up with Ben. We've heard from Ben before around MDT leadership, and then we're going to hear from Elizabeth again from Royal Cornwall and this case study as well. So lots of opportunity to ask questions as usual. We'll pause in between each speaker, and we'll have a time for some questions and answers at that point, or we can save them all to the end, and we'll have a little session at the end if we need to. Most of the time, we all know how these play out. Most of the time, we're asking questions as we go. Use the chat as you need to. Ask questions in there if you want, or post comments. Keep the conversation going, and we'll pick those up as we need to, and pose those questions to the speakers after each session. A few house rules as usual. Just I'll leave these with you as we usually do. The sort of expectations as a group. Cameras on where possible. Always keep on mute if you're not speaking, just to avoid those embarrassing disruptions in the background when somebody shouts you from the kitchen or the office. Get involved, ask those questions, listen to other people's contributions, and keep those minds open. Just before we get into the case studies and hand over to Naresh and Caroline, just want to give you the heads up in terms of what's going to happen next, in terms of the next session on the 13th of June. This is going to be the programme handover session. We don't like to call things closing sessions because, we always feel like these are ongoing. So this is more of a sort of programme handover to you guys. So there's a bit of an ask really from us as we come to the end of this program itself, this first phase of the program, and we want to encourage you to look at where you've come from. It's always helpful to look back a little bit. So you did a self-assessment before you started. So we're going to encourage you to repeat that self-assessment exercise to just to give you an understanding of your journey so far, and how far you've moved on. And also we want to invite you to produce a poster. As very simple, not too complicated, and I think we've got some technical, creative people in the background who may even be able to produce you a template or something which may help in that. But just a simple poster which highlights the work that you've done, and it's entirely up to you what you do and how you put that together. Some of the improvements that you've made and some of the observations that you've picked up. Some of you will be familiar with this kind of approach in terms of academic presentations or conference presentations, but the style and the interpretation is entirely up to you. We have got, I think on the next slide, we've got an example one that I think Robin or somebody's put together. This kind of thing, where we can just celebrate and demonstrate some of the improvements that you may or may have made through the course of this program, and some of the things I'm always keen to understand what's next. So not just a full stop underlining where we are now, but also including where you might be. As part of the next session, we're going to encourage those who have been able to submit a poster to talk through their posters as part of the session, and just talk through some of the key highlights of the work that you've done. There'll be people available to you. You've all got a coach. I think I'm going to ask you to lean heavily on your coaches to support you in this, both from the self-assessment and from the poster. But I think it's a really helpful way to sort of capture the journeys that you've been on, and then to be able to feed that back to the rest of the group and tell your story essentially. So ideally, we're looking for those self-assessments and the team posters to be back by the week or so before the event, so around about the end of play on the 2nd of June. Speak to your coaches. They'll have all the information, more information than I have right now in terms of that support, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you in terms of pulling some of those details together. But really encouraging you to use that final session that we have on the 13th of June to showcase and to share and to celebrate the work that you have done across this program. And sometimes what we often find with this, where we've done this in the past, is this is much about your learning as it is about any demonstrable improvements that you may have seen. Some of you may see some genuine improvements in some of the metrics you picked up on. Some of this may just be genuine. This is what you've learned over the course of this period, and then what's going to happen next and as you take that. So it really is about capturing whatever you feel is the right message within that poster presentation. So that was a quick sales pitch for the next session. So I'll leave that one with you, and just repeat, lean on your coaches as much as you need to. So I think we've got Naresh. He's ready and waiting. I see he has joined already, and Caroline is also on the agenda if Caroline joins us as well. But at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Naresh, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nick. Caroline can't make it with us today. She's actually in a clinic. However, I'm joined by one of our excellent cancer performance service managers, Zoe, who will be doing a double act, actually. Don't be alarmed right at the start. There's only one slide, so if it isn't moving, that's the intention, because we're actually going to talk about something quite human. It isn't about a slide deck or a PowerPoint presentation. It's about communication and leadership. It's about culture. It's about people, ultimately. And I know that everyone's had busy mornings, with clinics, morning catch-ups and meetings, so we'll actually keep this quite short and sweet. I want to take you into our MDT, our colorectal MDT. I sit in that room every single week with consultant surgeons, oncologists, radiologists, histopathologists, and our CNS team. And I feel a level of mutual respect. Often they won't move on to the next case before they hear the words thank you. And they'll often ask Naresh, are you happy with the outcome? And I'm able and comfortable enough to speak up regarding clarification of an outcome, regarding clarification of staging, because I know that one of the very first things that our consultants look at when they see a patient in their clinic, in fact, while the patient is in their waiting room, is the MDT outcome. So I need to know that the documentation is quite clear and helpful to them. I remember a story when I first started off in the role. One of our consultants, Nielsen Gupta, our clinical governance lead, in fact, who's on this call, he told me, Naresh, you're not here to just write the final plan for right hemicolectomy, for instance. You're here to capture the discussion. And he's put that level of trust in me and empowered me, which I really appreciate. And that's what I feel safe, I feel valued, and part of the team. And for me, leadership, really, it's about who we empower. It's about a mutual level of respect as well. I know that's not the case everywhere. Sometimes MDT coordinators, they can still feel as though they need to sit silently in the back of the room. They sometimes feel as though they are trusted to ask questions, or sometimes they haven't been invited to be a part of the discussion. I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to sit with our clinical team on a weekly basis, a couple of times a week. And one day I overheard one of the gastroenterologists say, no one works under me, my team work alongside me. And that's really resonated with me when it comes to leadership. And I feel that when it comes to working with the colorectal team, especially, it's that level of mutual respect and empowerment. And I truly just want every MDT coordinator to feel that way. That's not always the case, and sometimes it's hard to come by. I remember late last year receiving a particularly abrupt email by a referring clinician saying that they wouldn't fill out our MDT referral performer. Our clinical lead was copied into that email, and he immediately called me. And he said, Naresh, I'm not going to take that. Him being rude to you is them being rude to him, because as MDT coordinators, we're an extension of our clinical teams. And just an hour later, we got that referral performer completed, and it wasn't for MDT at that stage after vetting and triaging. But again, I felt safe, I felt protected and valued, really. Not only when it comes to leadership, it's not only just from our clinical leads, but it's also leadership from our cancer performance management. Let me say a few words about Zoe. She's not just our assistant service manager here at the Royal Free. She's a calming presence in what often might seem as chaos. She sees the pressure that we work under on a weekly, daily basis, and she doesn't add to it. She lightens it. She doesn't micromanage. She doesn't gatekeep. She empowers. So I'd like to hand over to Zoe to give her perspective about communication and leadership from a cancer performance management side.
Thank you. So I'm Zoe. I'm one of 3 assistant service managers for cancer performance at the Royal Free. And I manage a team of coordinators, trackers and assistants across 3 of our sites, including the lovely Naresh. So as Naresh has explained quite clearly, I think leadership and communication are vital in running a successful MDT. But that doesn't end with the coordinators. I think as managers, we are tasked with empowering our coordinators and giving them the space, the skills and the confidence to hold their own and to define their own role within their MDT. And I think as managers, there's many ways in which we can do this, but I believe that visibility and transparency is a very good place to start. Your coordinators may have questions, they may have issues that they want to discuss, they may just need to rant about a really stressful day or a really stressful situation that they have. And I think making your staff aware of your movements, your schedule for the week is quite important. It's something that I think has worked quite well for us, especially because my team are split across 3 sites, all doing different days and different things at different times. And I don't think this has to be overly detailed, but I think, for example, I've got a really meeting heavy day today, I'm going to be here, or I've got upload this week. So they sort of, they know the 2 days that I'm going to be, pushed back to back. And I think that way it allows the coordinators and the wider team to prioritize their queries. We deal with what's urgent and we deal with what's important first. And then from then on, we then can create a good time to meet up, have a coffee, discuss the other things, discuss any non-urgent issues. And I think that way also we ensure that we discuss everything in detail. We aren't just rushing these queries through because something has just happened that we're not sure of. And I think my team also, from their end, are also very transparent in they CC me in any great emails, any praise, any improvements that they've made. They also CC me in any pushbacks. So even if I haven't spoken, to one of them in a lot of detail that day, I can still know everything that's sort of running along with their MDT and with their tumour site, which is definitely helpful. They all keep me in the loop. So that I think is something which we do quite well as a wider team. And on a smaller scale, I believe that empowering your coordinator also largely depends on the personality of the coordinator. Some coordinators are extremely confident. Some have great clinical teams. Other coordinators may be lacking that same confidence and can be quite blind to the excellent job that they're doing. And I think all these individuals pose a challenge to us as managers to ensure that they're aware of what they're doing and how it aids to a successful MDT. So I think that working with your staff individually is also really important. For example, for the more confident person, our task might be drawing a line and making sure that they, aren't going too far over what extends their job role, and still encouraging everyone to go above and beyond and do the best job they possibly can do. Also making sure that we don't have unnecessary stress or we don't lead towards being burnt out. And for the member of staff who might need a bit more support and might need help building their confidence, in terms of praising every small win, every email that we know that might have just been a bit difficult for them to exert themselves. And as a wider team, we try and give constant feedback and celebrate every win, celebrate every bit of praise, everything, Easter, Christmas, the lot. We celebrate everything we possibly can, just to sort of, continue to boost them around. And I think being a cheerleader for your team, and encouraging that support within the wider team so they all cheerlead each other, does continue to motivate them. And I think by the staff being motivated and enjoying their job and feeling appreciated, that then also aids to a successful MDT, because they are putting the work in and they, enjoy it and want to see good results. And I think lastly, I'm sure everyone who has worked within cancer MDT knows cover is a constant challenge that we face, and our team are often called upon for support for the wider team in assisting with cover. Naresh himself, alongside many other coordinators that we have jumped in and covered up the meetings for us, some lasting 5-6 hours, and that's a large chunk of their time that they are missing and that we can't necessarily give them back. So as a manager, I try wherever I can to offer additional support to combat that time that they've missed. For example, if Naresh is in a meeting that leads up with the day that he's got to get his draft list out, we'll try and find another member of my team who can support with prepping that list and getting it out for him. So that's one less thing he has to worry about, and then also the list isn't late. I have another superb coordinator who categorises everything in her inbox. Everything is organised within an inch of its life. So while she was in a meeting for us, I dipped into it, categorised it, filed what could be filed, actioned what I could action. So at least that way, when she came out of that MDT, even though we couldn't offer cover for those hours that she's missed, it just means she can walk in and something's a bit simpler first. She can just clearly see what she's got to pick up. And letting the team know in advance if we're going to need cover or they're likely going to be used for cover is something that is quite important. I think it's something that works well, definitely we've found within our team, because at least they can prep their week ahead. They sort of know where they're at, and if they don't have to cover, well, it's a bonus because you've got that extra time back. And I think, again, it isn't always possible to prep someone in advance, but at least where we can, the team appreciate it, I hope. Naresh will be able to tell you. And I think all in all, that aids again into a successful MDT, because Naresh's MDT he's covering should run fairly, as normal. He's been able to prep. We've got some additional support, and then also for that MDT that needs covering, we've got a good, competent coordinator there who, will make that clinical team feel reassured that their outcomes are being taken and the patients aren't going to be delayed. So with that, I will hand you back to Naresh.
Thanks, Zoe. I just want to reiterate, it's just as an MDT coordinator, feeling valued by the team matters a lot. And in terms of communication, it's not just communication in the MDT, like being able to speak up. It's about communication before the MDT, sending the draft list and the final list at a set time so that the radiologists, the histopathologists have time to prep. Making the wider clinical teams and the admin teams behind the scenes aware of any changes to MDT times, any changes to MDT draft lists and final lists being sent out. For example, we have a couple of bank holidays in May coming up. So it's things like that that's really important as an MDT coordinator. Because as a coordinator, I believe that you're the bedrock of the MDT. One of the key takeaways that I want to emphasize for any coordinators either on the call or who listen to this well after the fact, whether you've been doing it for 15 plus years, or if you've just started in the role, we're not just admin. We're not just meeting organizers. We're a vital member of the healthcare team. And to any clinicians on the call, look at your coordinators a little bit differently. Ask them their opinion. What do they think regarding this? Encourage them to speak up. Explain your rationale. Because when MDT coordinators, especially when they understand the reasons why, they become a force multiplier for patient safety, for patient and quality of the MDT. In terms of leadership from another perspective, I'd just like to thank the national team, Dua, Alison and Nick, for organising things such as this, because shared learning is really important. We can always learn from each other. And in fact, if anyone wants to get in contact with either Zoe or myself, if anything that we've said resonated with you, feel free to give us a shout, or if anything, just for shared learning, really. Are there any questions?
Naresh, Zoe, thank you for that.
And I know we have Nielsen Gupta on the call as well, who's one of our consultants as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. That's really helpful and a really thorough summary, some really great insight into the world that you've created there. So thank you for that. Questions in the chat or hands up? And say Alison's gone first, so over to you.
Thank you. I just want to, there's lots of emphasis on what clinicians can do to build this relationship, but actually what do you think the role of the MDT coordinator is in building that relationship? What's the one thing that you can do that would actually make them trust you?
I think that's a really good question, Alison. I think the key thing from my perspective is having that conversation. I remember in my second ever MDT, actually the first ever MDT that I did solo, I actually asked the consultants, Neil was there, one of our other consultants was there, and I distinctly remember, how would you like the MDT crib sheet, the lists, how would you like it to be laid out? What information would you like to be on there? And they gave me the advice of less is more, not too much information, but this is what we need. And this is how we would like the list to be ordered. And actually what that showed them was that I was interested to help them. Communication, it's a two-way street, at least from my perspective. That's really helped me. And it's a constant learning process as well, right? You tweak one thing, that doesn't sort of work, and you go back and tweak that again. That works. And that at least that's the one thing from my perspective. Don't be afraid to speak up. I know that sometimes you're in that room, it can be intimidating with consultants up there, but actually they're just people at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Couple of hands going up now. We're going to go to Neil first.
I just wanted to echo that. At the end of the day, it's all about communication. It's not only the MDT team communicating with us as clinicians, but it's also about the us communicating to the MDT coordinator and the wider team as to what is required. At the end of the day, it's just all about communication and communication between everyone in the room and the MDT coordinator not being afraid to speak up and ask questions, because only then will things improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Olamide.
Hi, Naresh. Thanks for that. That was quite extensive and very thorough. Really, really appreciate what you do. And I think we've also realized that the role of the MDT coordinator goes beyond just putting a list together. It's also, there's a slight clinical part of it. I know, though you might not have the clinical background, but I think having done this over and over again, you can clearly tell which ones really don't need to come to the MDT. Just two questions. In your role, do you find yourself in terms of booking patients or allocation? So after the MDT, the couple of patients that need to be seen in clinic, do you have that role where you book the patients into the clinic slots, or is that the role of the secretary? That's my first question. And the second question, which I think I've forgotten now, is let's go to the first question first, and then I come. Yeah.
No problem. No problem. I mean, in terms of, I can only give my perspective and what I do here in our trust. I know it might differ in other trusts and other teams, but the secretaries book our clinic appointments after MDT. What I do, though, is I have a really good, quick mop up with our CNS team. Just a quick phone call, or at least I'm lucky enough to be able to sit right next to our CNS team. And our CNS team actually go through the theatre lists, they go through the next week's clinic lists in terms of the surgeon availabilities, and they liaise with the secretaries quite extensively in terms of booking those appointments. It quite helps me in terms of like just even tracking patients. I don't need to send like an email or a reminder. I can just quite literally turn my head and ask them a question. At least that's from my perspective. I don't know if you've heard of anything different regarding.
So I, before I was in this role, I was the skin coordinator at the Free, and we had secretaries would attend the MDT. So we had representatives from dermatology and plastics that would attend, and they would make their own notes of what appointments were needed, what ones needed bringing forward. We found that quite useful also.
Yeah, I liked it. So it's not just skin MDT. Lung cancer navigators come to the MDT. The prostate navigators recently have been coming. And again, it's just about communication. I see it whenever I'm covering another MDT, for instance. The CNS team, the consultants, they'll say, oh yeah, book this patient into my clinic next week. And they make a note of that. Of course, they can't call the patient then there, but after the fact, which really helps. How does it work in your MDT, for instance, for my own learning?
I think it's changed over the years. Back then, we had our secretaries attending the MDT, and they would sit CNS and secretaries and the MDT coordinator. And secretaries had obviously secretaries know your clinic slots, and they knew which patients needed to come. In the last couple of weeks, we've been making some changes where secretaries no longer attend, but we do have our CNSs who are amazing, and they can actually tell who needs to come. But I think there was the issue of whether the MDT coordinator, would have the clinic slots available and be able to book those patients straight in. But then what I've realized is it's a bit difficult because when we go back to the secretary, she says, listen, you've booked this patient in, but actually this patient is so it was almost like doing the job twice. And so we're on a 6-week trial where we're changing a few things in our MDT. And I think my opinion is that it's quite difficult to get the coordinator to book patients in. It probably might be a list of patients that need to have clinics or be seen in clinic, and maybe the secretaries alongside the CNSs can then work together. But I think we probably might stick to that original arrangement rather than putting the responsibility on the coordinator.
Yeah, and it's I guess the blessing in disguise also is, I guess, if the secretaries don't come to the MDT, its time is such a precious resource as well, because some of the other secretaries in our trust have said, oh yeah, it's a 5-hour meeting, and they might be needed for a very specific section of the MDT. In terms of also the MDT coordinator booking appointments in the service, I think it just differs from trust to trust where the MDT coordinators sit, in terms of, do they sit under cancer services or do they sit under the actual specialty service? And I know there's an ongoing discussion about that, but yeah, I'm really glad that you guys are, tweaking things, and it's all about learning, really, at the end of the day.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for that discussion and getting involved with some questions. Naresh, Zoe, thank you very much again for your time. Really, really interesting. I'm going to move things on now, and we're going to hear from Ben Lamb, and we're going to have a session on MDT leadership. If Ben, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the team from NHS England for inviting me. I'm going to share my slides if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah, go for it. On the slide.
So I'm a urologist in London. I work at Barts Health NHS Trust and also UCLH. I'll just try and get on my slideshow. And in the North East London Cancer Alliance, I'm clinical lead for MDT development. And I did a PhD in MDT improvement back in 2010, and since then have kind of continued my interest in how we can improve the way we work, improve outcomes for our patients, and also for the organizations we work for. So I'm going to talk a bit about MDT leadership. There's some disclosures, and thanks to my colleagues who have done a lot of this work with, Tiana, Louise, Ellen, and Jane. MDTs, as you know, they're essential to cancer care. But I think recently, because of the increasing complexity in the patients, the treatments, the diagnostic modalities, increased demand for MDT services, it's really emphasized that leadership and also MDT sharing are more important than ever for getting the best out of our team and getting the best for our patients. We've had MDTs for around 30 years now in the UK, and the UK is really a leader in some of the research and understanding of how MDTs work and what can make them work better. And they've been mandated in our improving outcomes guidance since the 1990s. And we know that they improve care for patients by reducing unwarranted variability. They've been shown to improve adherence with guidelines and some outcomes. And it's also thought that they're good for us as healthcare professionals. However, as I alluded to, patients are living longer with weight, more patients are being diagnosed with cancer. There are more options for diagnostic tests. There are more options for treatment. And this all increases the complexity of the patients that we're discussing in our meetings. Moreover, because MDTs have become embedded in our culture in cancer care in the NHS, there's a perception among some people that clinicians are sometimes uncertain about making decisions themselves, and the MDT becomes a fallback for all cases of patients with suspected or diagnosed cancer, and even some benign conditions. And this puts increased pressure on the resources available, on the time of our healthcare professionals, and with shortening of cancer pathways, the MDT risks becoming a bit of a bottleneck rather than something that improves care in all cases. I think one of the first things to draw attention to is distinguishing between the leadership in terms of the MDT lead, who perhaps has accountability for MDT performance, and also the role of the MDT chair in the MDT meetings, who takes a direct leadership role with the team in that specific forum. This is a kind of perhaps a rough distinction in those roles, where the MDT lead perhaps has a focus on the strategic development of the team, on bringing in innovation, on a kind of developing a culture of excellence in the MDT. Whereas the chairing is about actually making the meeting work, getting through the cases, making good decisions, and perhaps has more of a role for structuring the MDT meeting, bringing in different healthcare professionals and making sure those decisions are made and that they are made well. There's no one way to lead your MDT or to chair a meeting, and several different styles have been documented, from transformational, which is about encouraging a long-term view, bringing innovation into your team, motivating the team for the long haul. And that tends to apply more to leadership and chairing. There's facilitative or democratic styles, and this applies to both leadership and chairing, bringing in the input from all team members, reaching consensus and being inclusive. There's also other styles that at first glance you may think are perhaps less conducive to good decision making, but some of them, like directive and autocratic, if you think when you're towards the end of a meeting, time's running out, you've still got lots of cases to get through, you need quick decisions, and sometimes that decision making needs to be a bit more directed, and so perhaps that applies more to chairing than to strategic leadership. The converse of that is laissez-faire, perhaps where the chair takes a bit of a back seat and allows the team to work together more autonomously. And this is great, where you have proactive teams who are engaged, but it can risk disorganization, perhaps if the team isn't engaged, or if time's running out at the end of an MDT meeting. And then transactional is more suited to the kind of routine, mundane tasks, perhaps in leadership rather than chairing. But the key thing is really there's not one style that fits all situations, and I think it's really important that MDT leaders, whether they're strategic leads or chairs, they need to be aware of these different styles, be aware of their own behaviours and how they can use these different leadership styles to be an effective leader when they're needed. It's also worth pointing out that MDT followers, so the rest of the MDT, have a really important role in supporting the lead, and it's really important that the lead and the followers share an understanding of what the aims are, what the objectives are, because there's no point leaders trying to take a team to a certain place if the followers have no idea what the purpose is or where they're going. So it's really important for your MDT to kind of share in that vision so that they can follow you and be led effectively. We all know human factors have a big impact on our MDT meetings, particularly, and these fall into various different domains: teamwork, communication, authority and power dynamics, the cognitive load, and getting tired, and then the overall workload and time pressures. And each of these can pose a risk to the MDT lead and to the quality of decision making in MDT meetings. But there are really important things that MDT leads and the MDT chairs can do to be aware of some of these risks and to mitigate them by things like encouraging open participation, making sure presentations are clear, making sure different team members are brought in, perhaps with structured turn taking. Leaders can affect the culture, emphasizing the importance of participation of all professional groups, not just domination by a few. And then other practical measures like scheduling breaks, having limits to the number of cases, and then implementing things like streamlining to prioritize complex cases can offset some of the risks that the high workload and the time pressures that we all face take. We've recently written an editorial on balancing these ideas of collaboration and efficiency in MDT leadership, and this is just a kind of snippet of some of the strategies that we go into in more depth in this article. But things like operational initiatives like streamlining, prioritizing complex cases, and effective time management are really important in meetings. In terms of strategy, fostering collaboration, embedding quality improvement, and as was alluded to before in the chat, trying different things, getting data, seeing if it's made an improvement, and then carrying them on as normal if so. If not, trying something different. And making sure these align with the broader objectives of your organization, of your department, across different professional groups. And it's very important to remain adaptable. So shifting between these different styles during meetings, often within the same meeting, different styles may be necessary to bring out the best in the team and improve decision making. These skills can be taught and learned and refined. There is we're all participating in this training program at the moment, which is excellent. But historically, there's been a lack of focused training for MDT leadership, and not just for the MDT leads, but all members of the MDT, I think, can develop their skills and should be encouraged to improve how they work together. Thought I'd just give you an example of some of the work we've been doing at the North East London Cancer Alliance, where we've been working with some partners in our region we've had 2 cohorts coming through our MDT Cancer Team Lead Development Programme. We've been lucky to have an excellent faculty with Prostate Cancer UK, Living Potential and Practive, which are coaching organisations. Practive uses actors as coaches to go through some mock-up MDT challenges that leads might face and help work through some of these scenarios. And we've had excellent input from colleagues with great MDT experience, Tina and Melissa Miguel. It's a 4-month online program involving modules of understanding MDT effectiveness, insights, which is about character and personality and how that affects leadership and how that affects team interactions. We've had coaching and, as I said, kind of mock MDT scenarios to practice some of these leadership skills, identification of specific areas that our MDT leads want to identify for improvement, and then a bit about implementing quality improvement in MDT meetings, and then summarized with a session about developing communities of MDT leads, because often people do feel isolated. So bringing our leads together to learn from each other and develop that sense of community. We've had really good feedback and found that the delegates do leave with a real sense of what they can do to improve their MDT meeting as a lead. So in summary, there's no single model of good MDT leadership, but it's important to balance strategy and operational efficiency in MDT meetings. It's important to be flexible and adapt according to the scenario, and not to forget human factors, which have the impact to both enhance and harm the quality of our interaction and decision making. It's important to remember that these things can be learned and they can be taught, and there's a role for some of these courses. Thank you for listening.
Ben, fantastic as usual. Thank you so much for that. Really, really interesting. And I just love the idea of that structured training program as well. Sometimes we don't necessarily resource with training and develop the things that we want to happen, we want to see happen, and actually creating that structured program to that. That's really interesting. So thank you again for that. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. And thanks, Ben. Really, really interesting stuff there. I guess it's a sort of question about how do you think we can sort of help MDT chairs, especially sort of either get ready for their role or even learn once they're in the role. I don't know if you had any experience of sort of like either peer support, seeing other MDT chairs in their organisation, but any thoughts you've got on that in terms of how you think we can sort of help people? Because I think often they're thrust into it in some way or another around the MDT chairs, so I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. I think that this kind of training and course that everyone's participating at the moment is a really good first step for bringing people together, because I think one of the challenges is that since things like peer review, where people used to go and look at other people's MDTs, get ideas externally about what things are going well, what they can do to improve. There's really very little crossover now between MDTs, either of the same tumor type, regionally, or even within a single trust. Not all trusts have cancer boards or other forums where MDT leads can come together, and that came out as one of the themes in the course that we ran, that MDT leads often do feel isolated, and just having some kind of community to share learning, share challenges, and also what successes for improving those can be really important. One of the suggestions we had was a kind of buddy scheme in, perhaps within trust for new MDT leads. They get paired up with an MDT lead who who's experienced, to kind of chew the fat together and as a sounding board. But I think it is a challenge, especially with I don't know how it is across the country, but often MDT leads will not get time in their job plan for some of these more strategic roles, doing quality improvement, preparing and overseeing the MDT, and it's expected that that's done within the time they have to attend the meeting. So that's a challenge, difficult to to overcome.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that peer support can be really valuable. When I was a cancer manager, we once made all our MDT chairs go and sit in another MDT that was running from the trust, and it was quite interesting, the differences that we found, but also the sharing that could happen after that. People took stuff away, and it was a relatively small input for team members to do, but it had quite a lot of benefit. But I found that presentation really, really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Anybody else got any questions for Ben? No, leave a bit of space for thought. We'll have, if anybody thinks of anything between now and then, we can come back towards the end of the session if you think you just had a brainwave. You thought, I just forgot to ask Ben that, so we'll come back to, and that's the same for all our speakers. So Ben, thank you again for your time on that one. Thanks. Really helpful. Great, thanks for your time. I'm going to go to Elizabeth now. I think we heard from Elizabeth before. Always fascinating to hear from you, Elizabeth. So thank you again for coming back and sharing your thoughts with us. So I'll leave the floor open to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having me again. Apologies to those who've already heard me speak. There might be some repetition. You might be hear me going on again how wonderful we are down in Cornwall. But just some backgrounds. I am a consultant neurologist. I was cancer lead for 4 years. I've handed that role over to another of my colleagues as I've moved up to now clinical lead. But I just want to sort of talk about what I did in the time I was cancer lead, and how we've radically changed everything and actually made everybody much happier in the MDT. So if we flick to the next slide. So this session is about communication and leadership, and I've spoken previously about the sort of the minutiae of the actual changes we've made, but just to reiterate, I made 13 changes essentially in conjunction with my colleagues, and unbeknownst to us, all of the Southwest urology MDTs at the time were being secretly watched and recorded, and for sort of scrutiny, and whether they were working well. And ours came out as an example of excellence, and all the other poor trusts in the Southwest got told they had to change and sort of take our role and our leadership from this. Whether they have or not, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. But in terms of sort of communication and leadership, I mean, as Ben said, they're both so important. This is a meeting at the end of the day. This is a team meeting. You only get out of it as much as everyone puts into it. And at the end of the day, what you get out of it should be a quality discussion for each patient, and therefore the right plan and the right treatment for them. And I think about what I've done. So I hope I've been a proactive leader. And by being a proactive leader, I started by identifying problems and areas of needed improvement, and I found and implemented solutions for those. And how was I effective at communicating? Well, I think I worked with all the stakeholders to try and develop change. I negotiated those changes. I tried to attain agreement in those and did. But I think the two most important things, which we've heard before already, is I tried to empower others to develop leadership roles within the MDT. And I continued to communicate, I continued to listen, because when you've made a change that isn't static, that might be that actually that change you've made, you realise is the wrong thing. And unless you're going to ask people, talk to people, discuss it again, you're going to stay with the status quo as it is, and you're never going to continue to change and improve. If we flick to the next slide. So in terms of changes, as I said, I essentially designed them with the help of my MDT coordinator. A lot of them were admin changes, process changes, which I needed to make sure were also doable for the MDT coordinator, for the backroom cancer services admin staff. We had a lot of unnecessary admin repetition going on. It's a waste of everyone's time. Some of them were negotiating people out of the MDT, which is always a tricky thing. When you're negotiating with your consultant colleagues, you're then talking about job planning, which is always a tricky thing again. But it's important for the team to have the right team members in the room. And all of those, most importantly, I think, were discussed and agreed at Urology Away Day. So I got the managers to agree that everybody who was a part of the MDT panel went off-site for a morning. We cancelled all our clinical activities, and I argued that actually that this would be better in the long run because we would have a more productive team working afterwards. So just cancelling that one morning's clinic was worth it. And then secondly, we then repeated that MDT Away Day to review the changes that we'd agreed on to make sure they were still working okay, were they not working okay, was everybody still comfortable with what we were doing, and was there anything we should change, or should we just carry on as we were? So we flick to the next slide, please. So in terms of working relationships, I think when you're part of the MDT team, and if you are the cancer lead, you've got essentially two important working relationships. One of them is with the MDT coordinator. We've heard already, they are the most important person in the MDT. And our MDT coordinator is now part of the urology team. And a lot of what I did was I worked with her to empower her to take on leadership and ownership of the MDT. She essentially controls the MDT list. She gatekeeps which patients get onto the MDT. And that's because we've educated her, we've set up pathways, we've set up rules and regulations. And if somebody adds a patient to the MDT that she knows shouldn't be on there, she politely goes back to that person and says, I'm very sorry, not for the MDT. This is the pathway this patient needs to be on. Please arrange X, Y, and Z. And the other thing she does, which is extremely important, is, as Ben was discussing about, there's a difference between a leader and a chair. She controls the meeting. She is now the chair of our MDT meeting. So whereas before we had a bit of a discussion, some people would get bored, it would wax and wane the length of discussion, and then they'd sort of generate into a hubbub of different conversations before you moved on to the next patient. She would very much regulate that conversation. She will say, right, Mr. X, would you like to present patient A? Discussion happens. She summarises the discussion points at the end. She writes the action points. She ensures that there is a patient's name, a clinician's name next to every action point, so everybody knows what they're doing when they leave the room. And only then, when we're happy with that, well, then she allows to move on to the next patient. And that's really important. I think your other important working relationships are with everybody on the MDT panel. So that's be that your consultants, your CNSs, your admin team, whatever. I would strongly suggest people remove non-essential members from their MDT team. Ours used to be a bit of a social gathering once in the week where everybody got together. That's not conducive to having effective patient discussions and also keeping your MDT to a timely manner. So I removed members, I removed consultants, I changed job plans. But I think if you go about it in the right way, if you talk to people and explain the reasons for and against and have a discussion about it, it can happen. I adapted the flow of the meeting to be able to facilitate the best we could get from our radiology clinicians and our pathology clinicians. And also, I think it's important to just listen to people's concerns. There's a lot of anxiety about standards of care sometimes, and removing patients, not discussing patients. As Ben was saying, the MDT can become the safe place for people who don't want to make a decision, a clinical decision about that patient. But that can't be the case. You know there's patients that don't need to be on the MDT. You need to implement standards of care, but you need to do it by discussing with your consultants and explaining whys and whens, and having some guidance and some guidelines to back up, as I discussed in the first meeting, Ben's paper and the urology guidance we have for standards of care. And also be able to adapt those standards of care a little bit. So if there are people who are really worried about you're being too radical, you say, okay, we will discuss this cohort of patients, but not that. And with time, that'll change. People will become more confident and your standards of care will continue to develop as well. If we can flick to the next slide. So this is my final slide, and this is my final bit of advice, MDT housekeeping. It's really important. Decide on a meeting chair. For us, it's the MDT coordinator, and that is with the guidance as well of the cancer lead. But I think the MDT coordinator is the best person to be the chair. You need to facilitate an appropriate environment that allows all members to speak up. Don't let your meeting be dominated by the one person who likes to hear their voice. The MDT coordinator needs to be aware of all the important discussion points. They need to be given time to record them, and don't move on until all the documentation for that patient has happened. We used to have MDTs that rolled from one patient to the next. Nobody cared less what the MDT coordinator was writing down. Nobody gave her time to write it down. And then they all complained afterwards when the MDT outcomes made no sense. And I would say, don't tolerate disturbances. Don't tolerate the person in the back who's on their phone, the people in the corner who are having a social chat, the people who are there with no one to present who don't need to be there. All they're doing is disturbing everybody else from concentrating. So just politely ask them to leave, find them another clinical role to do on the day of the MDT. So I think leadership and communication are probably the most important things. Your MDT is only as good as the people that are in it, and the people that feel confident to talk, and the people that feel like they have ownership of that MDT. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Always great advice again there at the end. I think particularly around, from my perspective, I think there's an observation there around identifying the right chair, and it isn't always the most senior, it isn't always the most dominant in the hierarchical structure. It's the right person who can steer the conversation, would be my learning from what you've just described there. Has anybody got any questions for Elizabeth? Alison.
Probably less of a question, more of just pointing, sort of reiterating something you said. It's around that your away day, trying new things, and then coming back and saying, actually, did it work? I think we do have a little bit of a fear in the NHS of, we don't want to try it because if it doesn't work, it's all terrible. But actually, we need to be able to have that bravery and say, we'll give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And I think that was really good how you used that away day to sort of facilitate that. That was.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you need to make that away day a friendly environment, so that, you know, if your CNSs have actually got a really, really good suggestion, but they've only been a CNS in urology for a month, they might be too frightened to actually put that out there. And then you'll miss that really good suggestion. So, you know, it's not about having happy clappy meetings, but it's about just making sure that people feel they aren't going to be shot down if they suggest something as well.
Yeah. Or they suggest something that doesn't work.
Yeah,
give
exactly.
it a go. Absolutely.
Yeah,
no, thank you.
Absolutely.
Comes around to how you create the psychological safety to be able to try these things. Yeah, really good point. Thank you, Elizabeth and Alison. Ben.
A really nice presentation. I think you've put together there a lot of different elements, quality improvement, bringing in stakeholders, and it looks like it's worked really nicely. I think that the point you made about the separating the role of the chair from the lead and the other clinicians is really important, because there's a thing called dual task interference, where if you're chairing, you're probably not going to be able to give good clinical input, and if you're trying to give good clinical input, you're going to not be chairing as well. So separating those roles, I think, is a really good idea. And one of the MDTs I sit in, we've got a specialist nurse who chairs meetings, and in the other one we've got the urologist, but we rotate. So there's about 6 of us who do that on a rota. I think that you know, all these ideas, I think, help bring in the team, empower the team, and then means the you know, the work doesn't just fall on a single person.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I did try and chair the meetings myself for about the first year, and then I'd be sort of sat next to the MDT coordinator, away from everyone else, sort of whispering in her ear, you know. And part of this time was me also teaching her. She was learning neurology, you know, write this down, write that down. And then somebody would suddenly say, oh, yeah, is that right, Liz? Then that's one for you. You know, that's an nephrectomy for you next week because we don't want to do it. And I would go, oh, what? Sorry. And I completely missed the whole discussion about the fact that this was coming my way. And actually, I should have been part of that clinical discussion rather than part of just making sure the bits, the words were written down, you know, the patient age, this, that, and the other. And so, yes, completely important.
Thank you both. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Elizabeth. Matt.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I mean, really interesting stuff. I just was interested to know how your MDT coordinator felt when you told them they were going to be chair of the meeting, and how you helped them initially with that transition, because I can imagine like that might have been quite nerve-wracking for them, I guess.
It was quite a fluid process in that, because I sort of was starting chairing it, and then we were sitting together, and it sort of almost became that we were then both chairing it. And then I think the one day I did just say, off you go then, Michelle. And she went, oh, okay. But actually, she'd been half doing it before already. And I think the other really important thing is about belonging. You know, in teams, people feel like they need to belong. And whereas our MDT coordinator had always felt like she belonged to the cancer services team and MDT coordinators team, what we did was we really made her feel like she was part of the urology team. She gets, you know, invited to every urology social. She's part of the team. She's on the phone to CNSs now every day to be checking things. And I think because she felt part of that team and she got to know us all, actually, when she sits in that room with X number of consultants, X number of nurses, there is no hierarchy. She's just another one of us. So I think you need to get to that comfortable environment as well first. Clearly, you're not going to ask your MDT coordinator who's been in the team a month to start chairing. You know, you need to get to that comfortable environment first before they can then have the courage to go and chair that, I think. Because I think as clinicians, we don't appreciate how daunting it is for our sort of administrative staff to sit in a room with consultants. We all just go, well, you know, we're just doctors, we're just people. We still take the kids to school and walk the dog and all that. But they don't see it like that necessarily.
No, yeah, it's a weird thing when you start administering in a hospital that you get warned about, you have to be. It's actually no, they're just normal people, and what you just described, I think, is really, you know, simple but really powerful. Just to treat them as part of your team and bring them to stuff like that. I think it's really, really great. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Matt. Quote of the day: just normal people. Well done. Fabulous. Right. Any other questions from anybody else before we move on? Brilliant. No, thank you to all our speakers today. Really appreciate your time. So just wrapping up from today's session, quick next steps from me, then I'm going to hand it back over to Matt, I think. So already talked about this before, just a reminder, handover sessions on the 13th of June. Should be in your diaries already. If it's not, just let us know. We'll make sure that is the case. So keep on checking in with your coaches. We talked about the self-assessment and the poster presentation. I have picked up in the background during the session today that we do have a template. So a template in rapid order, a template is being pulled together to share with you if you want to use a template for the poster, and then we can get those submitted and we can use those in the next session, at the handover session. Don't forget, all the resources, recordings, slide decks are all available on the Futures Workspace. And then we'll be conducting the evaluation of the programme as well to ensure that we learn about our effectiveness as well on delivering these kind of programmes moving forward. Matt, I think I'm going to hand over to you for a bit of a sales pitch on the MOOC. Yeah.
Yeah, shameless selling. So the team that Alice and I work for, we have what is called a mass open online course, which we run we run 4 of them a year, but 2 are around cancer and 2 around sort of RCT. So it's a free course for any members of staff to join. It's tailored, I guess, to sort of MDT coordinators, service managers who work in those areas, and it's a 4-module program where a module's released every week, and there's online presentations from us, and then sort of exercise and work to go through. It's CPD accredited. So people who are interested in CPD accreditation can get points from it. It normally has sort of 1,000-ish people doing it at a time, so there's sort of peer learning as well from it. It takes in terms of time and energy, it's probably about 1 hour to 2 hours of time per week over a it's normally open for about a 7-week period, so there's 4 or 5 weeks of sort of facilitated learning from us as a team, and the sort of presentation stuff on there, but there's also extra time at the end for people to complete. So it's been relatively successful, but we're just opening a new cohort starting on the 19th of May. So there's a link, I think, in the chat. When these slides come out, I think we circulate the slides, but if we don't, we'll circulate this slide. Please circulate to your teams. As I say, it's free, it's open to anybody. You do have to sort of register for it, but it's a relatively straightforward process. We'd really love people to come and join up. There's some people in the chat saying it's good, so that's even better. You don't even have to just believe me, you can believe people that have done it. So as I say, please feel free to circulate around any contacts. It's suitable for it. There is there's stuff in there on the rules, but we've done a sort of general stuff if you're not like super having to, if you're not a cancer tracker or a cancer service manager not knowing about it, but there's also stuff on there quite detailed and stuff around operational management, how to there's a video of us doing I can't remember if it's a good or a bad MDT meeting. One of the modules is a good one and one of them is a bad one. So you can it's always quite amusing watching us pretend to be various people. Please feel free to circulate around to your contacts, and if you're then not able to take part now, as I say, we run it twice a year, so there'll be another one in about 6 months' time, I guess, where people can attend.
Thanks, Matt. Great selling, and it is a great course, and lots of great feedback. So the QR code, access that now if you want, or I'm sure the slides will be circulated. Click on the link. Definitely worth considering if you can, particularly the conversation we've had today around how we develop people, how do we train and grow people with the skills that we need from them. Have a look at this course. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you all for your time again, as always. Just to repeat, 13th of June it is, I think. Just get my months right. Friday the 13th, in fact. So we'll look forward to that one. Lean on your coaches as much as you need to around the self-assessment and the poster presentation, and really looking forward to listening and hearing in all the great work that you've been involved in. But for today, again, thanks to all the speakers. Really do appreciate your time. This will be a completely wasted hour and a half or so if we didn't have anybody who was able to share their story. So we really do appreciate you giving your time up to come and share your work with us. So thank you again for that. For everyone else, thank you for joining. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week, and we'll see you in June.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.